Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next video covering the 2022 midterms. This is, of course, part of my series, my guide to the 2022 midterms. Not just for me, for everybody. So today, I'm going to start a new series, the first episode of mine, of a new series of mine, not necessarily the guide, but it's a new, part of the guide. And I've seen a lot of other people doing these in-depth analysis or, in-depth videos looking at different U.S. Senate races this year, different governors' races this year. So I thought I would join, the party and I was originally going to start off, doing some more competitive states, but making a video about like Arizona or Nevada, and I will get to those eventually. But I thought, I'm gonna start with the state of Utah because I haven't seen a lot of videos made about it. Of course, a lot of people have mentioned it, before, but this is a surprisingly competitive race in such a red state. So, yes, let's get right into it. Of course, this will be the first episode of a series of mine, covering, all the competitive races in 2022, whether they're semi-competitive like in Utah or extremely competitive like toss-ups in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania. So we'll get to all of those eventually, but I just wanted to start off with the state of Utah. I will get to all of them eventually. But, yeah, so let's just get right into it. So, before we get into it, actually, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my main channel, my non-political channel, Interactor127, and yeah, turn on notifications so that you won't miss another one of my political videos. And yeah, and check out my comrade Growling Zoo 666. So yeah, let's get right into it. So, in the state of Utah, we have a surprisingly competitive race between the incumbent Republican Senator Mike Lee and independent Evan McMullen. Uh, uh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I thought uh, something was going on. Excuse me. So, in Utah is a very red state. It has voted Republican on the presidential level ever since 1968. The last Democrat to win the state was Lyndon Johnson in 1964 against Barry Goldwater, and even he won it by only 10%, which, winning Utah is good for a Democrat, but Utah is a very red state traditionally. In recent years, though, a lot of this has to do with the large Mormon population in the state of Utah. It is a very religious state, always has been. But the state is slightly trending to the left. And Donald Trump did not do as well as some previous Republicans in the state of Utah. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Utah is a more traditionally conservative state. It is Mitt Romney's now home state. He won it in 2012 by almost 50 percentage points. Barack Obama didn't even crack 25% of the vote in the state of Utah. In 2004, went to George W. Bush against John Kerry. Bush won 71% of the vote. But in 2016, Donald Trump only won the state by 18 points. And I say only because, when you look at these massive margins, you can see there's a 30-point decline from 20 from in 2016 from 2012. And a lot of that didn't have to do with just Trump. It had to do with an independent candidate, Evan McMullen, the same one that is running for Senate against Mike Lee. So Evan McMullen is a former CIA agent. And he is a conservative independent, and he is quite popular in the state of Utah. His goal was to win the state, and he made, pretty. This was the strongest showing in the election. McMullen is Mormon himself. Of course, Trump isn't, but Republicans dominate in the state of Utah. But this has been the closest a Democrat has come to winning Utah since 1964, as you can see right here. But that didn't necessarily have to do with the fact that Hillary Clinton was a good candidate for the state of Utah. It just more had to do with the fact that traditional conservatives were not very fond of Trump, and a lot of them backed Evan McMullen. In 2020, Trump increased his margin, and he actually got over a majority this time. As you can see, in 2016, he didn't even crack 15% or 50%. But in 2020, he won 58% of the vote. But Joe Biden did surprisingly well in the state. Even though he lost it by 2 points more than Hillary, he did almost crack 40% of the vote here. And this is one of the Democrats' best showings in the state of Utah for almost 60 years since LBJ last won it. So clearly, there are quite a few Mormons in the state of Utah that are traditionally conservative, liked Mitt Romney, liked John McCain, they liked George W. Bush, but they were hesitant to back Donald Trump. Now, that's not to say Utah will be a blue state in the future, but it does raise a good point about this. It does raise a question about this racist competitive nature because Mike Lee is very unpopular. He was first elected to the Senate in 2010. He actually was not in an open race originally. He was a Tea Party candidate. He won against the incumbent U.S. Senator in the primary, Bob Bennett, I believe. In the convention, Bob Bennett, the incumbent Republican who, was seen as an establishment Republican, had, voted for bailing out the banks during the or not during the Great Recession. And he was eliminated at the convention, but he didn't even make it to the state primary. And Mike Lee won that primary narrowly, and he won the general election um, overwhelmingly. In 2016, it got even better for him against, I forget her name, Misty Snow was the Democratic nominee. Lee won by 40 points. In the state of Utah, he outperformed Donald Trump significantly in the state. And Lee actually supported Evan McMullin for president in 2016 instead of voting for Donald Trump. Of course, this was, at a time when Trump was less prominent in the party. Of course, Lee only lost one county in 2016. And it's very interesting to see because Utah being a safe red state, it elected Mitt Romney, the other senator from the state, who is a prominent critic of Donald Trump by 30 points. Less of a margin, but still a very strong margin. And yet this race is becoming surprisingly competitive. Evan McMullin is an independent. He has said that he would not caucus with either party in the U.S. Senate if he is elected. And the Democratic Party actually chose not to put forth their own candidate because Democrats and traditional conservatives hate Mike Lee so much, even though traditional conservatives are more Republican. But the idea here was that because of Mike Lee's massive unpopularity in the state of Utah, propping up a more conservative independent who actually has a chance at winning would unite traditional conservatives and Democrats around McMullin, which would give him, a straight, a good chance at defeating McMullin rather than splitting the vote. And polling in the state of Utah has been surprisingly close. On the 538 average, Lee only leads by about 10 points over McMullin. Quite surprising. There are a lot of undecided voters here, and I think that this is the main concern for Evan McMullin is that even though Lee is getting under 40 or under 50% of the vote in many of these polls. A lot of them are registered voters, and there are a lot of undecided voters. Registered voters, remember, are not voters that are, necessarily going to vote. Obviously, most of them, most people that are registered to vote, I believe, do. But there are significant chunks of, registered voters who will not show up to the polls in the state of Utah. And I think that's what makes Evan McMullin's campaign such a long shot. But it's certainly the best opportunity for the Democratic Party to get Lee out of office. And as I've said, McMullin says he will not caucus with the GOP um, if he is elected, or the Democratic Party, either of them. Of course, the other two independents in the Senate, Bernie Sanders from Vermont and Angus King from Maine, caucus with the Democrats. They are technically counted as Democrats they are part of the Democratic caucus, so they do make up the 50 Democratic senators, but they themselves are independents. And I do think, McMullin, I don't necessarily know if McMullin is going to, caucus with either party. I know he said he hasn't, but of course, politicians don't always keep their promises. I think McMullen's a much more trustworthy guy. I personally support Evan McMullen in this race. I believe he is a great candidate. And while, he is a little too conservative for my views, I, do, he, especially on some social issues, I do agree with him in kind of, a more libertarian aspect of some social issues. He's kind of, you know, don't touch gay marriage, don't touch abortion rights. He personally is opposed to abortioning and gay marriage, but he does not necessarily support, the mainstream ideas that the GOP is pushing right now. And I do think that while Mike Lee has a clear advantage in this race, and while most of these undecided and other voters will break for him, Evan McMullen, I think, is going to do significantly better against Mike Lee than really anybody else could. Because if there was a Democrat in this race, it could have been close, but at the same time, it would just be splitting the traditional conservative vote and the Democratic vote. Instead, it's the strategy. I compliment the Democrats on this because they have made it a lot easier to defeat Lee now. So, what's my prediction? Of course, I've made quite a few predictions on, my channel for the 2022, but in this map will be, used over and over again. I think that Utah is a safe red state, and that's because I think that while McMullen is a very strong candidate, he is the best candidate that could go up against Mike Lee. He will appeal to Democrats and traditional conservatives who are obviously not going to vote for Lee. Of course, Utah is a Trump state. Plenty of Mormons did vote for Trump. I would say most of them did. But still, a lot of them did either out of reluctance or just simply voted for Biden because they did not like Trump's rhetoric. And I think Mitt Romney, being such a heavy critic of Trump, will help McMullen in this race. He has decided to stay out of the race. McMullen, has endorsements from across the aisle. He has Adam Kinzinger, Ben McAdams, Karen Shepard endorsing him, Howard Dean, even Michael Steele. So yeah, quite a few people across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, are supporting McMullen in this race. But I do think that if McMullen was to caucus with either party, I think it would be the GOP in the state of Utah. I still think that while Lee will probably win by a safe margin in the state, that it could be a likely state. I really have just kept it as safe because I really do not know if McMullen's going to keep his promise about you know caucusing with the GOP, not to slander him or anything. I just, want to, make it clear that politicians do not always keep their promises, and Lee has a clear advantage in this race. And so I think that's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. That was, me talking about the Utah Senate race. We will be covering the rest of these toss-up races. Not all of them necessarily are toss-ups. I'm not exactly sure which one I will do next, but I will try to be making them as often as I can. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Share it. Sorry, share it. Turn on notifications. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, where I do reaction videos and video game walkthroughs. If you want to hang out and have a good time talking about other stuff than politics. But if you want to check out more of the channel here, that's great. Also check out my comrade Growling666, who I will hopefully be collaborating with more soon. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.